Hey folks, Ace here, back with a long-awaited top 10 items video. This is continuing a series I did very early on in the full release of the game, and I kind of put on ice because they weren't getting the views that my tier lists were getting. I just assumed people weren't interested. But a lot of you have been requesting I continue the series in the comments, so here we are. No one can say I don't listen to you guys. Alright, just like before, I am favoring weapons that you can make builds around, although I will say by the time we get to Act 3, I'm kind of a little softer on that rule. There are some just like statistically, damage-wise, better weapons in Act 3 that you actually just want to slot into your build because at this point you're at the end of the game. There's only a few major battles left, right? So making a whole build around it, not as important anymore. Also, just like before, I do these in no particular order. So the first one I cover is not necessarily the worst of the top 10 or the best of the top 10. It is just, as a whole, top 10 weapons that I think are the best in Act 3. There's so many good weapons and items in this act, guys, by the way. I don't think I'm even going to do a honorable mention because there's just way too many that can go on the list. In a lot of ways, I've just picked my top 10 favorites, but I do actually think all of these are very, very powerful weapons I have used in my builds late game. Alright, enough disclaimers, let's dive in, starting with Nyrulna. Nyrulna is a trident that you can actually get right at the very beginning of Act 3, which is very nice, because if you do build around this, there's still a whole act that you can use it for. And it is not behind a boss fight or anything like that. Although it is behind a hidden area that is easy to miss. I definitely missed it on my first run. So some spoilers, just letting you be warned. You can find this in the jungles of Cholt if you get teleported there by the genie Akabi in the circus in Rivington. To get teleported there, you have to solve his cheating scam by pickpocketing a ring of Mage Hand, which he's using to rig the spinning wheel game that he runs. Anyways, if you do all of that and you kill a few pretty easy to kill dinosaurs, you will get Nyrulna. Nyrulna is a +3 trident, which deals an extra 1d6 thunder damage, which is awesome. And besides all of that, it has these abilities. Zephyr Connection. This weapon will return to your hand when thrown. You cannot be forced to drop the trident. When thrown, the weapon creates an explosion, which deals 3d4 thunder damage and a 6 meter or 20 foot blast centered on the target. Now, 3d4 is pretty good damage. I think that's a 7.5 extra damage on top of all of the other damage that it does in an AoE blast. Awesome. And this is thunder damage, which is pretty important. Thunder damage is a rare damage type that you are kind of incentivized to build around because there is the Hat of the Stormlord, I think it's called. I always just call it the Hat of Thunder Acuity because it is the Thunder variant of the Hat of Fire Acuity. Not often mentioned because it's very easy to stack up Acuity with fire damage. Not as easy to stack up Acuity with thunder damage, but Nyrulna is actually one of the ways to do it. Remember, hitting this in an AoE means potentially you proc it on many targets. Although I will warn you, I haven't actually tested this. This is still something mostly in theory. I haven't combined it with the Hat of Thunder Acuity yet. If you have, please let me know in the comments how that does. In theory, what it should do is give you a stack of Arcane Acuity for each proc of the damage that you deal to each target in the AoE. Even if it doesn't do that, it's still at least giving you one proc, and it's doing a lot of damage when you throw it. So, big throwing weapon, probably I think the best throwing weapon in the game as far as I know. And that's not all it gives you. You also get Veil of the Wind, which gives you an extra 3 meters or 10 feet of bonus movement speed and jump distance. When you have equipped this weapon, you also become immune to fall damage. That's kind of just a nice quality of life boost. It does shine with Radiant Light, which can be useful for proccing things like the Coruscation Wing and the Callous Glow Ring. I can't remember which one actually, I think it's the Coruscation Ring that you need to be attacking a illuminated target. It kind of works around that. Most of the Dark Vision mechanics, I think, have been removed from the game, I've been noticing. I haven't been noticing any Dark Vision, but that might be because I just instinctually play around it better. Anyways. And then, of course, it has its weapon actions, Piercing Strike, Maiming Strike. Those are pretty neat. As the Zephyr Flash. It's a rush forward, I believe it's 9 meters, and inflicts bleeding. And then it has Zephyr Break, which is like the Gust of Wind spell. All of these, of course, refresh on a short rest. Anyways, the main thing here is that it's just a really good throwing weapon, one of the best damage-wise throwing weapons in the game, and throwing builds can be quite good in this game. That is Nyrulna. Next up, number 2 on our list is Duellist Prerogative. Honestly, I went back and forth on this one for a while. It almost went into my honorable mentions because it's, while very powerful as a weapon, it's also very weird as a weapon. And it's very difficult to slot it into builds, I find. Anyways, in the end, I decided to include it, at least for its potential. So, this is a rapier that is designed primarily around being used one-handed. Just as a note, if you read the lore here, it belonged to someone named Lenore the Fleet. It's the second Lenore in Baldur's Gate 3, and one of many references to Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven. I'm not sure why they decided to include so many, but Lenore is a character in The Raven. And besides being the previous owner of this rapier, she was also the previous tenant of the now abandoned arcane tower that you can find in the Underdark in Act 1. Anyways, onto the weapon. It is a +3 rapier, which is going to deal an extra 1d4 necrotic damage on hit. Necrotic damage is not a very valuable damage type. You can't really build around it as far as I know. It's still 1d4 extra damage. The fact that it's necrotic isn't really that big of a bummer. On top of all of that, you get just a ton of extra abilities. And the first I want to highlight is this one down here, Dueler's Enthusiasm. This functions on a bonus action and actually refreshes per turn. So you can use this once per turn. And what it does is allow you to make a single extra attack on a bonus action, almost like you are dual wielding. Dueler's Enthusiasm works as long as you are using Duelist Prerogative in your main hand. So if you main hand this with a shield, you can still get off a bonus action attack as if you were dual wielding and get all the extra benefits of a shield. And that can be pretty useful on certain classes. Any caster class that you want 12 levels in and that you want to be able to stack Arcane Acuity, this is getting you a whole extra attack. It's not the ideal way to stack Arcane Acuity. You usually want that on classes that get extra attack features. But you can do it, and I have done it, not with Duelist Prerogative, but with Belm, which has the same kind of feature. So that is Dueler's Enthusiasm. It's once per turn. And then it gets all of the normal abilities that rapiers get. On top of that, you will get the Challenge to Duel feature. This is also once per turn, I believe. Challenge to Duel is exactly like the spell Compel Duel, except its DC is set at 17. It says that it inflicts bleeding on a target. And I've never had this proc, but like I said, I actually haven't used this weapon that much. But in my tests, I never got bleeding, so I'm not sure how that is. The game never showed a roll for bleeding. It only showed a DC 17 roll on the Compelled Duel, but that's a big deal. Compelled Duel is a pretty valuable CC, forces enemies to attack you instead of somebody else, and you can do that on a bonus action once per turn at a pretty high DC of 17. So that is awesome. Already this is incentivizing it to work as a kind of tank build, which is pretty strange, a rapier tank build. It gets Withering Cut. Whenever you hit on with a melee weapon, you may use your reaction to deal additional necrotic damage equal to your proficiency bonus. By the time you get this weapon, your proficiency bonus will be a +4, and it won't increase throughout the game. So it's +4 necrotic damage on top of the necrotic damage it was already dealing at the cost of your reaction. And then, with Elegant Duelist, the final feature that it gets, when your offhand is empty while wielding this weapon, so no shield or no second weapon, you score a critical hit when rolling a 19, and that of course stacks with all other features that are similar. Moreover, you gain an additional reaction per turn, which is extremely interesting and very weird. Altogether, this creates a strange sort of build incentive, where you want to wield this one-handed, which means to get all of the features from this weapon, you actually have to ignore an entire item slot, which is the main reason why I seldom use it. I think on most builds it's probably better to just slap on a shield or a second weapon, a stat stick weapon, or something like that. However, Being able to challenge duel on a bonus action and get an extra reaction per turn is tantalizing. From an action economy perspective, that's quite good, and immediately I think of this on some kind of tank build. A tank build, someone that wants to absorb damage, but also can utilize their reactions. The immediate candidate that stands out to me is, of course, Abjuration Wizard. They absorb a lot of damage when targets attack them. They get a lot of use of their reaction, either through counterspell, getting 2 counterspells per round on your wizard, very cool, or they can use their Arcane Ward to soak damage from other targets if they haven't already challenged a duel. Now, this is a build I haven't played yet, but I'm very interested in experimenting with it. I think you'd have to go Drow here, because they get the Rapier proficiency for free. I don't know, maybe y'all can try that and let me know what you think. Like I said, just kind of a strange weapon. It has a lot that it does, but there's also some drawbacks, and I always personally like that. Sometimes limitations are the soil for creativity, and Duellist Prerogative definitely has a lot of limitations, but also a lot of strength. It's a very cool weapon overall, but let's move on now to number 3 on our list, which is the Sword of Chaos. This is a weapon I use on most of my runs when I get to Act 3. It's pretty easy to acquire. It is locked behind a boss fight. Oh, by the way, Duellist Prerogative, you can get this if you complete the Save Van request. I don't want to spoil anything from the quest because it does involve fighting a bad guy that is teased in earlier acts, and I don't want to give away that reveal. But you can start this quest by going and talking to Laura, who is in the headquarters by Basilisk Gate, right when you enter the lower city. Like immediately when you enter, if you turn to your right, there's going to be a building there where the Flaming Fist are kind of headquartered, and Laura is in there. You should be able to find her pretty easily. Okay, back to the Sword of Chaos. Like I said, Sword of Chaos is locked behind a boss fight, but it is one of the easier boss fights in my opinion. I pretty much rush down this quest chain to get the Sword of Chaos. It is a +2 Greatsword, which will deal an additional 1d4 necrotic damage. Okay, decent. The big feature that it gets is Chaos. On hit, you will regain 1d6 hit points. This is just like the Shattered Flail, which I covered in the top 10 weapons of Act 1. If you combine this with a Periapt of Wound Closure, you can actually get a lot of healing, especially on cleave attacks, which it gets. Hitting multiple targets will give you a big burst of healing. That's 6 hit points healed with the Periapt of Wound Closure. If you're just any build that makes a lot of attacks, like a fighter, or I often give this to Minsk on a hunter single class build where he's getting AoE attacks every attack, you can stack up so much healing from this that you become practically immortal. And as soon as you get a character that's practically immortal, you can start doing very cool things, like putting levels into Cleric and casting Warding Bond on everyone. Damage doesn't matter now. I know a lot of people just do that with camp casting, but I ban camp casting in my runs, so I actually have to build a tanky character to benefit from casting Warding Bond on everybody. Sword of Chaos on Warding Bond builds, extremely good. Just a really good damage and tank item all in one. Awesome. Next up is Bloodthirst. This is another weapon locked behind a boss fight. I don't want to spoil anything. There are 2 major bosses that you encounter in Act 3. They're going to be teased even at the end of Act 2. One of them will have this dagger. It is a core part of her design, so you will see it in cutscenes. And yes, there's an option to confront her, potentially kill her, and take her dagger. So it shouldn't be hard to find. This weapon is extremely interesting. Like I said, it's a dagger. It's a +2 enchantment, and it gets all of these extra features. Let's go through them. The features will actually vary depending on if you're using it in your main hand or your offhand. Regardless, you will get improved critical, where the number you need to roll a critical hit is reduced by 1. Of course, this stacks with everything like it. You get True Strike as a bonus action on a cantrip. It recharges once per short rest. I never use this. It's still True Strike. I mean, I guess maybe as a bonus action, you can get some use out of it, but I just haven't, to be frank. Yeah, I usually combine this in a dual weapon build, so I'm using my bonus action to actually attack. It is a bound weapon, and of course daggers are thrown weapons, which means you can throw this and it will return either to your hand or to your inventory. Although I find when I throw it, I don't get any of the main hand or offhand bonuses, so keep that in mind. You're actually losing quite a bit if you use it as a thrown weapon. Now, first off, if you use it in your main hand, you will get the Exploit Weakness ability. And with that ability, creatures hit with the weapon will receive vulnerability to piercing damage. So that is doubling all of the damage that you deal that is piercing. And now maybe you understand why I like to use an offhand weapon with this. Vulnerability to any damage type is amazing. Vulnerability to a physical damage type, incredible. I mean, unbelievable. Like, the potential to snowball out of control with this is insane. This is marking the target with vulnerability for 1 turn, which means you can build an entire team comp around dealing piercing damage. I haven't done it personally, but I've heard other people do it. I mean, just mathematically, it makes perfect sense. You are potentially doubling the damage of your entire team comp on a physical damage type that's like resource free. Unbelievable. So yeah, that is the main feature of this weapon. However, if you wanted to wield it in your offhand, you could also get True Strike Riposte. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you may retaliate and gain True Strike. I haven't done this yet, but that also sounds really good. Any retaliation feature is always going to be good in turn-based systems like this because they are action economy breaking. Now, I don't know, maybe we can look here. It seems like True Strike Riposte is legitimately a free action. And if that's the case, this can almost be as good as Exploit Weakness. It's way harder to build around, but if you can make your character unhittable, then you can just melee attack over and over and just completely break the action economy. It will also increase your armor class by +1, contributing to making you unhittable. Altogether, this is the kind of weapon you can not just build a build around, you can build an entire composition around. Insanely strong, super cool weapon. I'm definitely going to be building more builds around this in the future because I obviously haven't played around with it as much as I'd like. So that is Bloodthirst. Next up on our list, number 5, is Markoheshkir. Markoheshkir is a legendary staff. You can get, again, pretty early. It's locked behind a boss fight, but it is not a difficult boss fight. Definitely not the kind of boss you want to wait till level 12 to fight. You can pretty much confront them at level 10 or 11 and reliably win the encounter. This will give you several things. First off, whenever you wield it, you will get a +1 bonus to your spell saves DC and spell attack rolls. That is nice. Although at this point of the game, your spell save DC and spell attack rolls are mostly augmented through Arcane Acuity, so it's not as important to get that flat +1. However, we won't say no to that. It will give you Arcane Battery. This will allow you to cast your next spell without using a spell slot, which means it gives you another cast of a 6th level spell per long rest. Amazing. 6th level spells, extremely valuable. This is giving you a whole extra one. Incredible. And then finally, it gives you Kreska's Favor. This is a very strange buff. Basically, you're going to pick an elemental damage type, and it is going to give you free casts of spells for that damage type, and also a unique bonus that augments any spell that deals damage of that type. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can look at them all on your spare time, but the ones that I use are always Bolts of Doom and Frost of Dark Winter, so we can look at those. So here's a great example, Frost of Dark Winter. Whenever you cast this, you will gain resistance to cold damage, and your cold spells will deal additional damage equal to your proficiency bonus, right? So that's +4. When you deal spell damage, you will inflict 1 turn of frost upon the target. Frost stacks up. When there are 7 or more turns remaining, they will make a DC 12 Constitution saving throw, or take 1d4 cold damage and become frozen. Frozen is a pretty debilitating condition. It's like a stun, except it makes them vulnerable to bludgeoning, thunder, and force damage, if I'm remembering right. Anyways, the DC 12 is actually kind of a bummer. It does not work with Arcane Acuity, so it's pretty statically a DC 12. If you want to get reliable procs of this, you basically have to debuff the corresponding save. And I believe it is a Constitution save for Frost. So you want to stack some kind of reverberation on the target if you want to freeze them. Anyway, sometimes targets will just roll a 1 though. So, I mean, yeah, it's nice for that. Also, while attuned to Kreska's Ice, you can cast Cone of Cold and Ice Storm once per short rest each. That's right. Cone of Cold, level 5 spell. Ice Storm, level 4 spell. These are refreshing on a short rest. Amazing. So not only is it augmenting these spells, it just gives you so many of them per short rest, per long rest. Amazing. Yeah, just absolutely incredible. That's why I rush this, is just to get all of these free cast of spells. And it's honestly the free cast of spells that I prefer from the staff. There's also Bolt of Doom. This is probably the best one and the one I see people building around the most. I totally get it, because what it's going to do is make anytime you deal lightning damage on a spell that you will charge up lightning charges. Lightning charges are great. We've talked a lot about them in my previous videos. You can just listen to my backlog for me to describe those. But also, while attuned, you are going to get Chain Lightning. Not only a level 6 spell, but one of the best level 6 spells in the game. Chain Lightning, A tier spell in my list, but borderline S tier. You're going to get 1 cast of this per short rest. And also Lightning Bolt, which is also a pretty good spell. So yeah, you can see what you're getting from this. Just so many spells and a pretty cool augment to your elemental damage types. Amazing staff. I slap Markoheshkir on my wizard or my sorcerer in pretty much every single run of this game. Next up is another staff, the Staff of Cherished Necromancy, probably one of my favorite items in the game. I was talking about this even before I completed my first run because of how amazing it is, and I find a lot of people don't realize how bugged this weapon is. You can get this from Mystic Carrion, you can pickpocket it off him, or if you confront him during the quest that involves him, you could take it from his corpse. Staff of Cherished Necromancy is a +2 staff, which will deal 1d4 necrotic damage on hit, but that's not really the reason you use it. If you're attacking with this weapon, you're doing it wrong. Because the big thing that it gives you is this right down here, Life Essence Harvest. When the wielder of this staff kills a hostile creature with a spell, they greedily absorb its energy and gain Life Essence until their next long rest. What does Life Essence do? Life Essence is a resource which you can spend to cast any necromancy spell of your choice at any spell level. So of course, even if it's a level 1 spell, you're always upcasting it at as high of a spell level as you can get. Now, how it should work is that you spend 1 Life Essence to cast the spell and it is consumed. At least that's what the description implies. But that is not how it works right now or has ever worked since full release of the game. How it actually works is if you get 1 Life Essence, you can use it to cast necromancy spells and it is never consumed. So this completely unlocks necromancy spells. You're upcasting them at 6th level all of the time and they cost no resource whatsoever. They become like cantrips to you. And it's been a while since I've done this because I consider it corny, but certainly in the past, you could actually pass this staff around, and every caster in your party could get 1 kill while holding it, 1 kill with a spell or cantrip, and then all of a sudden they're unlocked, and all of their necromancy spells are free to cast on your entire party, potentially. Anyways, I always use this on my clerics. I consider it just best in slot for late game clerics, because clerics get Inflict Wounds, which when upcast as a 6th level spell, really starts to slap for some crazy damage, and when combined with the Elixir of Bloodlust, you can actually potentially cast it twice per round. Most clerics are already spamming Spirit Guardians for that basic AoE damage, and your cleric actually becomes one of the best strikers in your party. I mean, we're talking well over 100 damage per round when using the Staff of Cherished Necromancy. Absolutely incredible. Even after they fix the bugs, this staff is going to be still so good. Oh, and by the way, you also get Heightened Necromancy with it, which will give disadvantage to saving throws on Necromancy spells. I use this on Eyebite a lot, which is also free to cast. So, Staff of Cherished Necromancy, amazing. Definitely one of my favorite items. Next up, number 7 is Balduran's Giant Slayer. This is a legendary greatsword, a +3 enchantment. Sadly, it is locked behind one of the hardest boss fights in the game. It is very easy to wipe on this boss fight, especially if you don't really know how it works. First time going into it, people wipe all the time. My advice to you is just make sure you have at least one cast of Globe of Invulnerability. You will discover this fight if you pursue Will's quest line in Act 3. So that's my advice to you, my non-spoiler way. Of course, you can always look it up here on the BG3 wiki if you want spoilered information. Okay, Balduran's Giant Slayer, like I said, +3 greatsword. It's going to give you a few things. First off, Giant Slayer. On a hit, double the damage from your strength modifier. Yes, you heard that right. You're now doubling your strength modifier on damage just like the Tavern Brawler feat, except you can combine this with Great Weapon Master. Now, it is only on the damage, not on the attack roll. But still, it's a lot of extra damage, especially if you have any character that's making a lot of attacks, like I said before, full-class fighters or full-class hunter rangers. You're just getting a lot of damage from this feature. But on top of all of that, it will grant you advantage on attack rolls against large, huge, or gargantuan creatures. There are many of them in this game. There's going to be one of them in the very last fight of the game. So, yeah, using this even on the very last fight of the game, it's still probably best in slot for any great weapon user. You can get Giant Form. This is sadly an action to cast. You can pre-buff with it, but I don't really pre-buff. To me, that breaks the rules. But yeah, Giant Form, you cast this, you're going to grow, you're going to deal an additional 1d6 weapon damage on your attacks, on top of everything else that it adds. It'll give you 27 temporary hit points, advantage on strength checks and saving throws, and this lasts for 10 turns. However, I believe the temporary hit points actually last until your next long rest. Yes, that's what it's saying down here. And I will say, I have used it just for that. I'll cast it outside of combat, let it time out, because I just want 27 extra hit points per long rest. I mean, per short rest, like, that's honestly pretty good. That's adding a lot of durability to your build. And those are the main things it gets. I mean, it's still going to get Pommel Strike, Lacerate, Cleave, and then Topple the Big Folk. This is a unique weapon ability that only it gets. You will deal additional damage equal to your proficiency bonus. And if you hit a large, huge, or gargantuan creature, they take an additional 2d6 slashing damage, and must succeed a strength saving throw or fall prone. So, you know, nice. A little bit of extra damage against large creatures, potentially. Anyways, altogether, this really is just a damage weapon. And by late game, it's one of the best damage weapons on one of the bread and butter damage builds, which is Great Weapon Master Fighters or Hunters. So, I end up using this quite a bit, but honestly, I use it for just some of the last fights because it's locked behind one of the tougher boss fights, to be honest. Next up is Dead Shots. You can get this very, very early in Act 3. It is a longbow, probably the best ranged weapon in the game. Sadly, ranged weapons just tend not to be as good as like staves, like wizard weapons, or as like straight up melee weapons. And that's kind of a shame. But also, ranged attacks have their own advantages, which kind of, equals it out. This is a +2 longbow, and it's going to give you 2 major features. First is improved critical. It just lowers your critical hit chance by 1, but this works even if you are not making attacks with the dead shot. So you can absolutely use this as a stat stick for your rogues and paladins to crit fish with them. And I mean, if it's just using an item slot, you might as well crit fish, right? I mean, I don't usually make builds around crit fishing if I have to expend a lot of resource to lower that crit chance. But if you can get it just for a weapon slot, an item slot you needed to fill anyways, yeah, like that's pretty valuable. Then you'll also get Keen Attack, which will double your proficiency bonus when rolling ranged attacks with this weapon, unless you have disadvantage. This is adding a ton to your to-hit bonus, which combines incredibly well with the sharpshooter feat, making this kind of the best ranged weapon late game, unless you want to do dual hand crossbows. I haven't compared dual hand crossbows with the Deadshot yet, but I think the Deadshot should be just about as good. I mean, obviously it depends on the build. Like if you're a thief, you really want the crossbows. But the problem is that there aren't really any good hand crossbows. So even though the weapon type has a lot of innate advantages, there aren't really good weapons of that type. The Deadshot is an incredible longbow. You can acquire this just from buying it from Fitz the Firecracker at the Storm Shore Armory in the Lower City. That is the open air kind of bazaar area right by Sorcerer's Sundries. So that is the Deadshot. Next up is another bow, Blightbringer. Now I'm going to be honest with you guys. I haven't used this weapon, but I feel like it's really, really good. So, I'm not trying to deceive you or anything, but I'm going to talk about it and tell you the potential I think it has. But just bear in mind, I haven't fully tested it. This is another weapon that you can buy. You can buy this from Enthari Danthelon at Danthelon's Dancing Axe in Worm's Crossing. If you do Jaheira's questline, you will automatically be taken here. But yeah, it's pretty much right at the beginning of Act 3. It is a +1 short bow. +1 at this point in the game is kind of a shame. I would have preferred at least a +2. It gets the Blightbringer ability, which when attacking gnomes and dwarves, this weapon will deal an additional 1d4 bonus to attack and damage rolls, which is hilarious. I don't know what Larian has against gnomes and dwarves, but to be honest, I can't think of a lot of gnomes or dwarves that you're going to be fighting at this point in the game. And yeah, also, if you are fighting them, they're not difficult fights, so you're not wanting to build around damaging them. So this is primarily just a hilarious cosmetic feature. The big thing that this gets is Prey Decelerator. When this weapon lands a critical hit, it will also slow the target. Slowed is a very, very potent condition. A slowed target has a -2 penalty to their armor class and dexterity saving throws. Here's the important thing. They can only take an action or a bonus action, not both. And if they take an action to attack, they can only make one attack per turn. This completely shuts down entire bosses in this game. Basically, any of the attacking bosses, you've reduced their damage by, more than half. I think it's fair to say more than half. As well as just made them easier to hit, made them weak against any spell that targets the dexterity saving throw. It's a really potent debuff. And you can get this anytime you critical hit. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This is like a crit fishing ability, and it could be really nice, but what if you don't land that key crit on the right target? What if you land the crit on the target that's already going to die, or that slow doesn't affect that much because they're not making multiple attacks anyways? I hear you on all of that, but I would like to counter with the fact that the assassin exists in this game, or any item which will guarantee a crit. There's a ring that guarantees a crit. There is an Illithid power which guarantees a crit, and you can combine all of those to get a guaranteed slow on a target. How long does this last? Usually slows last 3 rounds or something like that, which is enough to kill a target. Guaranteed, no saving throw, you just get it. And that is enough to turn at least a few boss fights I have in my mind from potentially dangerous to completely neutralized. And as good as some of all of these other items are, statistically speaking, none of them give you that tactically. So I feel like Blightbringer 100% belongs on this list, even though I don't hear people talking about it. Although I have to admit, maybe the reason I don't hear people talking about it is that it's bugged or something like that. I don't know. If there's a bug, let me know in the comments. I'm going to be using it when I hit Act 3 on my next run, almost certainly. And finally, that brings us to the last item on this list, Deva Mace, one of the weirdest and funnest items in Baldur's Gate 3. Deva Mace is the mace that the Devas use. Devas being like the summon that you can get with planar binding and stuff like that. The Deva Mace is a standard mace. I don't think it has any pluses to damage or to hit. However, it will just deal a straight up extra 4d8 radiant damage per hit when you hit with it, which is absolutely insane, guys. Think of this in terms of a smite. A 4d8 damage, I believe, is smiting with a 3rd level spell slot on a paladin. If I'm wrong about that, correct me, but I'm pretty sure it starts at 2d8 damage at level 1 spell slot, and it adds a die 8 each time you climb up. Yeah, so that 4d8 would be a 3rd level spell slot. That's a max level full class Paladin Smite. You're getting that on every hit. Every hit, and it's radiant damage, which means you can combine it with all of those extremely broken radiant damage items like luminous armor, like the luminous gloves, gauntlets, I think they're called, the coruscation ring, the callous glow ring, to start stacking up radiating orb on targets. So, yeah, I mean, just amazing. And then you can just combine this with Savage Attacker. I don't know how much extra damage Savage Attacker is adding per hit whenever you're rolling 4d8 radiant damage dice on top of, whatever else that you give this. But I can tell you, I've done builds with this, and it is incredible. This will launch, like, just your straight up sword and board paladin into, fully optimized, like, Great Weapon Master level damage territory, even if you're not smiting. I mean, yeah, Deva Mace is crazy, and it's just a one-handed weapon. Right? You wield this with a shield, you get all of the defensive bonuses of a shield, and you're still hitting like a truck, right? I've heard of people dual wielding it, and that's a little weird because of the, like, acquisition. I find, like, if you just play through the game, you're probably only going to get one Deva Mace, but there's ways of getting more than one Deva Mace. So let's just talk about how to acquire it, because it's pretty weird, very easy to miss. It used to be that you could loot this from a Deva that you summoned, but that's not allowed anymore. And even when I reload old saves where I did that, they've just taken the item out of the game. Now the only way to actually get this is if you rob the Stormshore Tabernacle, is what it's called. So the Stormshore Tabernacle is right when you enter the lower city. So I mentioned the Basilisk Gate area where you can meet Laura for the Duellist Prerogative quest. The Stormshore Tabernacle is like the next building down, and it's kind of like an all-purpose temple for multiple gods in the Forgotten Realms, and you can donate money to the temple for certain buffs. Anyways, if you donate money to the temple, you can actually go in a hatch in the front right corner if you're looking at the door from the inside, and there's going to be traps. If you disarm all those, there's a chest where all of the donations to the tabernacle are. So you can re-steal all the money you donated, as well as a pretty good amulet for, like, clerics. Anyways, if you do that, literally steal from multiple churches, the gods of Faerun are going to be mad at you, and so you will get a condition called Castigated by Divinity. This is a curse, and it lasts, I believe, until your next long rest or until you use the remove curse spell. But in either situation, if you remove it or you take a long rest, divas are going to show up and try to smite you because of what you did. It's usually divas. So basically, it's divas depending on which god you worship, and most of the time it will be divas. But if you worship Tempest, Helm, Ogma, or Kelemvor, it'll be Genie. If you worship Shar, Loth, Grumsh, Tiamat, Talos, Vlaakith, or Aladagwar, it's a Cambion. You want the divas, because divas have the Deva Mace. So just have someone like Gale, who worships Mistra, or Shadowheart if you've gone the good route to steal from the chest, and they will get castigated by Divinity, which will spawn divas. If you kill the divas, they will not drop the mace. Not until you take a long rest, in which case there'll be a pouch where the diva's corpse was, and that will have the Deva Mace. I don't know why they've made it so complicated. Frankly, they should probably just remove it from the game because of how overpowered it is. But it's pretty fun. Yeah, it's pretty fun. So enjoy that. Enjoy the Deva Mace. Put on at least one like paladin build and just go to town. It's hilarious. All right, that is all of the items we are going to be covering. I'm not going to do a honorable mentions for this one because there's frankly just so many. There are many items that you're going to get use out of in your builds, and they're probably best in slot for your particular builds that I'm not even mentioning in this list. But items get completely out of control in Act 3, which is fun because that's when you fight all of the biggest bosses in the game. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will catch you next time.